Hi, everybody. I think the room is still being set up.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Mark.
Right.
We are too early before the beginning of the meeting.
Yeah. I guess it's always the same, isn't it? On opening days of events, there's always a bit of delay and
Yeah.
things slotting into place, not quite ready, maybe.
We have to wait.
I think so. I hope we can start in a couple of minutes' time if people want to take their seats in the room. I don't know if we have a technical moderator we can check with. I don't know. Maybe we should just go ahead and start. I don't have permission to share anything. I don't know if I can get that permission to share a couple of slides, but anyway, okay. I'm not sure who was speaking then, but Olivier, do you want to open up the meeting with a few words of bilingual welcome, which I think will go down well in the African context here. So, Olivier, do you want to say a few words?
Olivier Adonio Kwali for the bonjour tout le monde. I'm in Senegal, actually in Senegal, and I will use the both languages, English and French, to introduce this session, please. So I'm welcoming you to this 12th session of the Africa Internet Governance Forum. And the topic is creating greater digital trust and security through more effective deployment of internet standards and adoption of best practices. So we are welcoming you to this session. I want you to note that ISCC stands for Dynamic Coalition on Internet Standards, Security and Safety. It is the latest dynamic coalition creating within the IGF ecosystem. And we need the participation of Africa region. That's why our coalition has decided and obtained such a space on this forum to introduce to you this new coalition and inviting you to join us. So you are very welcome to join the ISCC. I will repeat it in French, please. Bonjour tout le monde, je suis Olivier Kwame, membre de cette coalition, la dynamique coalition sur les normes Internet, de sécurité et de confidentialité. C'est la toute dernière dynamique coalition créée dans l'écosystème du Forum sur la gouvernance de l'Internet dans le monde. Et cette coalition a besoin de la participation des Africains. Nous avons besoin que les membres africains de la région Afrique participent activement à nos activités. Et c'est pourquoi nous avons demandé donc cette plage d'espace au cours de ce forum pour vous présenter cette coalition, ce qu'elle fait, ses études en cours et vous inviter à nous rejoindre. Voilà donc, brièvement dit, ce que je pourrais vous dire. Je vous souhaite une très bonne attention, une très bonne écoute, un très bon séjour au Malawi. Thank you. You have the floor, please. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Olivier. Thank you very much. That's I want to share your appreciation for this opportunity to participate in the African IGF this year, and appreciate very much the Secretariat providing space in the program for this dynamic coalition of the global IGF, the UN IGF, to explain its work and its current priorities, and in particular its research activities. So it's a great opportunity for us as a global coalition of stakeholders to connect in particular with stakeholders from governments, from business, civil society, internet users, communities in Africa. It's very important for us to do that, and we've held similar sessions in the European regional IGF, Eurodig, and Asia Pacific region as well, and we're hoping to do similar sessions in North and Latin America and Caribbean and other regions. So by way of introduction, my name is Mark Carvel. I'm policy advisor with this IGF Dynamic Coalition. I'm based in the UK, where it's sweltering hot. We're nearly 40 degrees today, record temperatures. It's my job really to moderate this session. What we will do, we've only got 60 minutes, so we'll have to be pretty quick. But we will run through the context of this dynamic coalition, what its main aim is, and also what areas of work that we're focused on, and we'll have colleagues from the leadership team of the coalition explaining that briefly very shortly after I've spoken. And we want to allow some time for questions and comments. You really need inputs from stakeholders to tell us that we're doing the right thing, or that we want to explore new areas. And I'll talk a little bit later on about our ambitions to widen the scope of our work in the future. I'll mention that later on when we finish. So hopefully we'll have about 20 minutes for questions and comments to allow you to go into some of the detail of what we're saying in summary in our opening presentations. So from me, first of all, just a bit of the context of this initiative in the IGF. As we all know, internet and ICT security is top of the agenda for all stakeholders, and governments and business, civil society, and ordinary internet users are anxious about the security of their devices and applications. And we heard earlier this morning in workshop 33 from the UK government about their work on IoT security and codes of practice and standards development. So this is actually a neat follow-on from that workshop this morning. So It's widely recognized that internet products and services are increasingly vulnerable to security threats, and the spread of online harms and criminal misuse. We're increasingly exposed to this. The standards community have, been working hard to develop standards, but the research that predated this initiative indicated that those standards are quite often not deployed. They're not adopted and put into network devices because they're not designed, with those standards on board. And security by design is one of the key issues that this initiative is addressing. So fostering greater trust in the internet and through wider, more effective and more rapid deployment of these standards is critical, but it's quite often not taking place. And as I say, the research that the IGF conducted in 2018, 2019, led by our coalition coordinator, Wouter Natris, tried to investigate the reasons for the failure to deploy these standards much more effectively for the benefit of users worldwide. We are a dynamic coalition of the IGF. Those of you who are familiar with the IGF system will know that in addition to the annual forum, which this year will be in Addis Ababa, there are a whole range of intersessional activities undertaken by groups of stakeholders on a voluntary basis to investigate key issues and come up with solutions and policy recommendations and guidance. And we are one of those coalitions. There are about 25, I think, at the moment. We were launched at the virtual IGF in 2020. So we're relatively new and we're getting going, but we've got 3 working groups actively established with clear mandates and mission statements. And they've each devised research projects. And I'll ask my colleagues in this meeting to explain briefly the work of those 3 working groups. And so you get a sense of some of the detail of what we're doing and also the opportunities for you to participate and contribute to this work. So I'll turn to our first presenter, Nicholas Fiumarelli, who I'm very glad to see is with us. Great for you to join us. I've no idea what time it is in Montevideo because Nicholas is with the ISOC chapter there, and has been a very active contributor and activist in the youth fora in particular, and he is the chair of our working group 1, which is looking at IoT security by design. And I'll ask Nicholas to explain briefly what the working group is now doing in this whole area of IoT security, and the aim of developing some proposals for manufacturers, for users, for governments, and so on, to recognize and adopt and take into account worldwide. So I'll stop there and introduce Nicholas, and then Nicholas will come back to me and I'll introduce our second working group lead and the third working group lead after in sequence, before we then open up to questions and comments. So Nicholas, over to you. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you so much for the introduction. Nicolas Fiumarelli from Uruguay in South America. Well, yes, very glad to be here at a regional IGF talking about our dynamic coalition. I will talk a little about the working group 1 of the IS3C. Well, the idea of the working group 1 basically is to review this current security related IoT initiative. We are focusing on the security by design of the Internet of Things in this working group. There are a full range of initiatives and practices worldwide In order to develop a coherent package of these global recommendations and guidelines for embedding this security by design protocols in the development of Internet of Things and the applications beyond. So we are trying to do this kind of research about it, because we understand, as Mark said, that there is a large gap between the theory and the daily practices of IoT security. So the idea of the research proposal or the work of this working group is to reduce this gap, right? We know that, for example, there is a large scale of security threats spreading across these IoT networks. And yes, there are a lot of standards or security standards from different standardizing entities that are qualified and are.
Nicholas, we can hardly hear you.
Sorry? Can you hear me?
We cannot hear you, please.
So
Speak on the microphone.
what we would like to have is to yes. So we are part of this dynamic coalition that is a multi.
Nicholas, can you speak into the microphone? We cannot hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
No, we still cannot
Can you
hear anything.
Hearing, we want to hear you loud.
Nicholas, I lost my audio there. I don't know. I hope other people managed to catch you.
No, Mark, none of us
Anyway,
can hear.
we'll pick up on the points you raised. I heard you at the beginning, but then it kind of faded out for me. I don't know. I hope other people didn't have the same problem. Okay.
Can you check now? I am
I still can't hear you now.
Hello. No.
Is it only me or?
Can hear you.
Yes, okay now.
Okay, if you can hear me, I will continue. I was saying that yes, there are a lot of best practices that are more effectively
I can't hear you.
Yes or no?
Okay, maybe we have a technical problem. I don't know if our moderator can
Yes.
help with that. Okay, but let's
my audio
go
is-
on to working group 2. And I was expecting our vice chair to be present to explain about working group 2. But I can't see our at the moment as an attendee. So maybe I'll just say a few words about working group 2 while we wait possibly for Awo to join us. That's Awo Adian, who's our vice chair of working group 2 on education and skills. And the basic premise here for the focus of the coalition on education and skills is that there is a gap between what is coming out of the standards community and skills development in relation to understanding the importance of security standards. And this is kind of gap between what's happening in tertiary education sector and also in vocational training. Do they actually cover enough of the ground relating to security standards? So there's research going on by the working group, led by Janice Richardson, and who is the chair of the working group, and Awa Aliam, who I was hoping to could join us. And this is actually going on at the moment. And they're doing a lot of interviews with the business community to understand what business requires of students in cybersecurity relating to cybersecurity, including the contribution of cybersecurity standards. So the overall objective really is to develop much more collaboration between educational decision takers and policymakers in government and in industry, so that the skill set for graduates in cybersecurity and also from vocational training institutions is more complete with regard to cybersecurity standards. So it's very important part of the coalition's work to engage with the educational sector and to widen the scope of skill sets to include much more specific expertise relating to cybersecurity standards. So that's basically the approach being taken by Working Group 2. If our is able to join us later, she can perhaps expand a bit more on that brief summary. Now, let's turn, while we wait possibly for Awa to join us, let's turn to Working Group 3. And this relates to what was a major issue that emerged from the research that I mentioned back in 2018, 2019, about potential role of procurement agencies and supply chain managers in driving the adoption of cybersecurity standards through their purchasing decisions, essentially, and what they are setting out in their specifications for the devices and networks that governments in the public sector, administrations at the local level are setting up, and also what in the business community supply chain managers are doing. So I'm happy to say that the chair of Working Group 3, which is specifically looking at this, Mallory Nodal, has joined us. Mallory is very active for the Centre for Democracy and Technology and is a member of the IGF Best Practice Forum on Cybersecurity, and so is very active worldwide. She's I think joining us from Washington, so terribly early for her as well. So Mallory, would you like to explain a few words about the rationale for this particular work on procurement and supply chain management and the research project that you have designed? It's not actually operating yet, but perhaps you can explain more about the prospects for that as well. So Mallory, over to you. Thanks very much.
Thanks. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks for inviting me. I think, Mark, you have said it all. I don't really have much to add other than what you've said in your introduction, other than, we think of this research project in two main phases, but there are actually three. The first two are a proper scoping and mapping to really understand what are the challenges and opportunities. And we're very much focused on what role the Internet Governance Forum globally can play. Obviously, there are a lot of industry bodies, standards for themselves, and the participants in them are already dealing with and tackling these issues. But what specifically could I was muted. Is there an issue with the audio? Okay, I'll continue. Yeah, we're curious about that. The second phase.
Mallory, I'm sorry, I can't hear you either. Is it only me? I don't know. Maybe it's only me.
I think it's only you.
So
So the second phase is going to then look at guidance documents that comes out of that scope to make sure that what we suggest to the various intermediaries that are handling procurement or dealing with implementation in products actually can benefit from this high-level guidance document. So we would do more, less desk research in the scoping phase, but then in the second phase, we would do a lot more surveying and actually speaking to groups and entities most affected by a shift in policy. And then I did mention there's a third phase, but it's not so much a phase, it's just a cross-cutting strategy that we want as many people affected or who needs to have seats at the table to help participate in our research. So we think of this as iterative, that those that we interview, those that we cite their research, and anyone who is involved or touched by this research project actually come along with us in the dynamic coalition to help us improve our methodology, our research, and ultimately our influence, because we want the research to actually land somewhere and to have an effect. So that's the very rough outline of what this looks like. I think one of the great benefits of joining you all in Malawi right now is that we can extend a hand and ask if you have any interest in this research to certainly reach out to Mark or anyone else that you can find the contact information for, to see about joining our research for this one. But also I know my colleagues working on the other work streams would also benefit from any volunteering or time or insight or papers you think we should cite, that sort of thing is always very welcome. So I will hand it back to you, Mark. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mallory. I've got my audio sorted out now, I think. So that's great. Thanks very much for running through that, the work planned for procurement and supply chain management, the business case, if you like, for adopting and promoting the take-up of standards. It's a very important objective. We are constantly looking for those kinds of drivers, and it's widely recognized that this has a lot of enormous potential, as you've just described. So we really do invite the stakeholders to contribute to this and help develop the research and ultimately lead to some policy recommendations and guidelines. So, and that is a message for all of our working group activities. So we've run through the current working groups that the coalition established early last year and are now holding discussions and developing the activities and rolling out the research projects. Hopefully the one Mallory has described will roll out before too long. We need some sponsorship. I didn't mention at the beginning that IGF dynamic coalitions do not receive any funding centrally from the IGF, which is funded by governments and business donors, the IGF secretariat and so on. But dynamic coalitions do not receive any of that funding. So we really look to sponsors to help us cover the costs of the research activities that we undertake. And so please spread the word, check it out and talk to people who have funds that are available for research activities that we could apply to. That's very important for us because we do have some costs that inevitably we have to cover, administration costs and research consultants and so on need to be paid for. So that's basically where we are now. I don't know if anybody in the room has got any questions or if any questions have come through in the chat. Let's see. Well, first of all, shall we go to the room and in a long way and ask if anybody has any questions, who wants to grab a microphone and or just comments on what we're doing, the rationale for it, and what we hope to achieve in terms of tangible outcomes that can be presented at the IGF this year in Addis Ababa and in Japan next year. We will continue our work, of course, through the years ahead. Does anybody in the room have any questions that who wants to take the mic? Meanwhile, I'll ask Olivier to check the chat to see if anybody is.
Yes, Mark. Hi, Mark.
Hi.
Yeah, this is Jimson.
Jimson, great to see you again.
Yes, and thank you for moderating, and it's a pleasure listening in and very valuable inputs provided. The issue of standard, especially with IoT in regard to the fourth industrial revolution, is very, very important, and we value the work you are doing. I believe a number of us here who would like to follow what all the research work you're doing. So maybe if you could provide us some a link or something, a website where you have activities and where you are now and how we can contribute. That would be great. Yeah, thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much. Yes, we will. And I did actually have a slide ready to put up, which I'll see if I can get it. No, it's not working. But certainly with our report from this session, we will provide the links. I mean, if you go to the IGF website and then go across to intersectional activities on the menu of the IGF website, and then scroll down to the dynamic coalitions, you can then see the list of dynamic coalitions, including ours, IS3C, Internet Standards for security security and safety, and you'll see then our mission statements, our report for last year's activities, and we will be updating on the research activities shortly. We do have our own website in the course of finalization. Okay, I don't know up there. It's a bit of random screen sharing, but anyway, okay. Olivier has put a link in the chat. I think, yes. Okay, and Nicholas too. Thanks so much for that. Sorry for the glitches this morning with screen sharing and so on. I don't know. I did rehearse it, but it didn't work. Olivier, yep.
I don't know if there is. Is there a translation on site or not? Il y a une traduction sur place, il y a une traduction en français. S'il vous plaît.
I'm getting very fuzzy audio. I didn't quite catch that, Olivier. Sorry. Okay, so we see if there are any other comments or questions, and thanks very much, Simpson, for showing great interest in our initiative. Nicholas has put some more links in the chat. Thank you. If I go back to Nicholas and just stimulate some discussion, perhaps with a question. We talk about IoT security by design, and as I mentioned, there was an interesting workshop earlier this morning at the African IGF from the UK government about their work in the standards field and codes of practice and so on. What, Nicholas, do you think are the kinds of outcomes from your work and the teamwork of the working group that we will then be able to present, or if even not finalized, at least interim results of the current research at the IGF in Addis? Is there anything you can say at this stage about the direction that our tangible outcomes from this work may take?
Yes, thanks, Mark. I will maintain my camera off. Can you say if you can hear me well?
I can hear you perfectly. Excellent.
Yes, well, with this research, we are having a research with different phases. And the main idea is to the IS3C has maintained, has created and maintained a repository of different documents from different natures, from going from best practices in IoT, standardization entities, recommendations, or best practices around IoT security, but also a lot of practices and standards adopted in national and regional policies. This is recommendations and regulations, right? Like policy documents and regulatory documents that are talking specifically about IoT security in the different countries. So we are focusing in this research in this kind of documents, in the policy and regulatory ones. And the objective of the research at the end, at least for the effort of this year, is to have like a top of the best practices that are mentioned in this document. So in order to also to recognize if there is a gap between the theory and the practice that we already demonstrated in the IGF pilot project and in 2019 and 2020, as Mark said. But the next step is to compile maybe an easy-to-use document with the most important best practices following in the repository. And then we could take into account these data security best practices, relevant industry and consumer codes of practice that some countries already have. For example, product safety legal requirements, all the relevant consumer protection initiatives, for example, as product labeling in the case of electronic devices. There are an amount of different solutions, or at least also from the technical side, we could say protocols at the different levels. For example, at the IETF, you know that is the major standardizing entity for the internet protocols. We know that the Internet of Things now is part of the core internet protocols. Also because this is, for example, from the IETF side, there is an issue with the constraint of these devices. You know, maybe you don't know, but the IoT has limits in terms of energy, limits in terms of the potential that it has, the quantity of data that need to be transferred, that are bits, right? For temperature issues, for the condition of the air, we have basically bits. So it's a low quantity of information, but in a massive scale. And we are seeing a lot of deployment of IoT technologies worldwide. For example, in Latin American region, this is widely increasing, and the traffic, the internet traffic, is affected by this upload of sensors information. So all the privacy, security, and stability of these networks are at risk. There are, for example, some identified solutions that are now RFCs, like we say in the IETF, that are requests for comments, are documents that are finalized and reviewed by these main internet authorities or security experts. And for example, there are 6 solutions in the IETF sphere. And it is known that if 2 out of 6 of these solutions are widely deployed, well, the average security of the Internet of Things worldwide will benefit a lot. We will cover a lot of the current problems. You know, Mirai networks, there are a lot of examples and new threats in terms of IoT bots or net bots that uses the power and the decentralizing the nature of the IoT to use this as a vulnerability to attack then other machines, or to provoke sometimes the denial of services attacks. So they put down networks. So yes, with this research, we are trying to focus in this field, in more the regulatory and the policies around IoT, and to identify if there is a lack of evolving mechanisms, right? Because we, for example, me personally, I think that technology is always on the front and the laws are behind, right? And yes, it's a current thing. As long as we are going into the future, these things are going more rapidly, right? There are a lot of threats the quantity of threats is exponential compared to previous years. So it's a moment when we need to define, and there was an IGF pilot project, as I mentioned, in 2019 and 2020, presented, and also the multi-stakeholder advisory group of the IGF level have been involved. So we recommending this work to happen. So at the end, these are things that we need to consider, and this research that will hopefully have some intermediary results in Addis Ababa that we could present. I think will have some relevance, at least for identifying what are the current practices, because with this research, we have identified 21 policy documents from different countries. There are 21 different countries that have some mentions about IoT security or IoT mechanisms for providing trust and stability and more to attend these privacy issues for the IoT. And yes, we consider all these documents. Yes, the idea is to compare, to generate some statistics, to see what are the things that are lack in these regulatory things, and also to provide, right, Mark, recommendations for the policymakers. And that is the final outcome. Maybe you can amplify on that point.
I was going to ask, actually, I mean, within the African continent and the context of sustainable development and the transformative impacts for economies in Africa of IoT, do you see major gaps that need to be filled? I mean, have you had access to policy documents in Africa as part of your survey of what initiatives are being developed and the approaches that are being taken by governments and communities in Africa? Do you need more data from Africa, for example?
Yes, we currently have 2 or 3 documents from Africa. That is something that we are looking for, to include more documents. But right, we maintain a desktop research that we are having to include more documents. We are identifying some, for example, the African Union, or maybe some regional recommendations that currently exist. But yes, we sent a message and we want to proliferate this this call of help, right? For maybe if you know of some intent of IoT security mechanisms or laws being emerging in the African continent, please reach to us so we can include this. Yes, but Africa is something like a lack we have, because there are no currently or existing there are the amount or the quantity of document is not sufficient for the region in comparison, for example, with other regions as Europe. That is the one that has more advanced in this field. Thanks.
That's I mean, that is why the outreach through the African IGF is so important, I think. I mean, not only for your working group, but also for the other 2. And against the whole backdrop of sustainable development goals and the opportunities that new technologies create for economic and business opportunities. We need to help and ensure we, as the global internet IGF community, if you like, need to help ensure that those opportunities are fully exposed, and also how to address the risks and the vulnerabilities for the benefit of stakeholder communities in Africa. And I hope very much that this coalition will continue to reach out, including to the regional IGFs, the West African IGF and East African IGF, and the African Internet Summit next year, hopefully will be an opportunity. And we need to connect with the governments, there's no doubt about it. And the African Union Commission, we have talked to in the past, and I hope we can continue to have a dialogue with the African Union Commission on these very issues. Thank you, Nicholas. I'm wondering if Mallory perhaps has any additional comments from her perspective on the African environment and opportunity for us. Mallory, would you like to add anything?
Only that I think it is very important that whatever guidance comes out of the Global Internet Governance Forum's dynamic coalition on this issue include practitioners, institutions, and research that has come out of Africa. Otherwise, it won't be, I think, trustworthy and truly global. So we really need that perspective. And I will make sure that our research contains that or has a massive caveat that it is only, Europe and North America considered. I think it's very, very critical that we truly make the IGF outputs as global as possible.
Yes, thank you, Mallory. And of course, we are all looking forward to the UN IGF in Addis Ababa at the end of November and early December. All the IGF dynamic coalitions, including ours, have the opportunity to present their work and update on progress and set out their work plans for the future. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we are really just at the start. We have these 3 specific working groups that you've and areas of focus that we've heard about today on IoT, security by design, education and skills, and procurement and supply chain management. But we have received proposals for establishing additional working groups in new areas, including on the consumer side, consumer advocacy and consumer protection. That would encompass the kind of labeling schemes that have cropped up in our discussions about IoT, the labeling of devices so that consumers are aware of the level of security protection that they have. So consumer issues and the importance of consumers being aware of the relevance of key standards. The education work will continue and expand into the areas of protection in particular, as well as wider skill sets. And then also on data governance, I mentioned, and we also plan to draw up, and I think Nicholas referred to it, with the help of a new working group, a set of key standards and best practices in this whole area, across the whole board of internet technologies, because it's a very complex area. Stakeholders are completely confused about the proliferation of new initiatives, new standards coming out of the standards developing organizations, the IETF and ITU and others. It's a very complex area. And this coalition aims to draw up a kind of guide on the key standards and practices that are going to be important for all users and adopters of technologies to look out for and understand the benefits of. So that's a key area of work. It's still now being framed up, but we will launch it at the IGF in Addis at the end of November, early December. So the IGF is a key opportunity for us to connect with stakeholders worldwide, including, of course, the African community, who will be very present, of course, with the IGF hosted in Addis this year. I think our time is coming up to a close. I don't know, Olivier, did you see any other useful comments or reactions or queries? I think our host is about to tell us to wind up, but
Mark? Yeah, Mark, can I come in?
Yes.
Okay.
Olivier, yeah, please do. Sorry, we'll just very quickly, yeah.
No, this is Jameson. Well, it's with regard to Nicholas. Yeah, Nicholas' work. So I just wanted to chip in an information. Perhaps it could help. Maybe he already has it. The Nigerian Communication Commission has a provision in its status that requires every equipment that will be coming into the telecom industry to be certified. So how successful that process is, I don't know. But the idea of verification of IoT standard that come into the system, they hold on that, but you could check it to see how successful that effort is. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jimson. Okay, that's very helpful, and we'll follow up with Nicholas. I'm sure we'll follow up, and that's very helpful input. And it's a message to everybody. Please get in touch with information about relevant developments in the African environment. That's very helpful. So, host, I'll just pass quickly to Olivier to say a few words of thanks, to endorse what I say. Thank you very much for all your attention and your participation here, and I hope we'll hear from you again. So, Olivier, over to you. Olivier, I can't hear you. Oh dear, sorry about that. Well, anyway, I'm sure he was going to say merci beaucoup, as well as thank you very much for everybody's participation. And I hope you found the session useful. We're very output orientated. We're very open. You can join the coalition simply by subscribing to the mail list. That's how open we are, as very much consistent with the principles of the dynamic coalitions of the IGF, of open participation. And we hope very much you'll be able to join us and contribute. And we're looking for funders too. So if you know anybody who's got some money to support our research effort, that's be very helpful too. I think I'm under pressure to hand back to the host, because I think we have run, although we started very late, but we have run over time. So over to our host. I think. No? Well, Nicholas has put the link for subscribing in the chat. Thank you, Nicholas. So please check the chat for all the links and useful information, and don't hesitate to get in touch with comments, questions, and suggestions for new areas of work for this coalition. Okay, I think I have to close now with that final word of invitation to join us, and to thank you all for your attention. And I'm going to hand back to the host, I think, who was going to maybe make an announcement. I'm not sure.